Good morning, everybody, and welcome. This is Lizzie and Justin from Thirdspace, here for week 95 of our Turning Towards Life project. We apologise to those of you who are joining us live for being slightly late. One of the things that keeps on surprising us is that the world of the technology that we use keeps on changing. So we were slightly caught out by an unexpected change to Zoom this morning, but here we are in different places in the world, and I am so glad that we're able to do this. Lizzie and everyone, we say this every week, but it's always true. Welcome. Thank you for joining us, whether you're live with us in our Facebook group, on YouTube, on a podcast, some other way that we haven't even yet realized that people are listening to this yet. We're really glad you're with us and that we get to do this together.
Hello, everybody. Sorry that the technological issues were really on my side. Justin was patiently waiting for me and I was scrambling around because the settings have changed and things. Anyway, you'll be glad to know I was doing a Scrabble, and the whole theme of today is about perfectionism, and I feel very imperfect and have learned to not criticize myself for that. And I trust that this is a space into which all of us can be imperfect, and I feel so appreciative that we found this chance to bring something by Anne Lamott. I think, Justin, I've said this a couple of times before about Anne, is that this deal with perfectionism and getting things right and having standards, she's so incredibly liberating to read her work. And it's such a lovely thing that we can bring this, because I think it's one of the most debilitating things to have these standards for ourselves. And so I really want to bring this in the spirit of allowing us all to be free into our creativity somehow. And the thing that really, really I love about Anne Lamott is also her humour. And so for us to bring this with a kind of lightness as well feels very important. And the fact that I've begun the call in a complete scramble and haven't been able to press the buttons right and all those things is just perfect. Mm-hmm. This is a little bit long, Justin. So shall I read and then you can pick the bit that you'd like to repeat? Or something?
Yeah, why don't we do that? And before you do, I just want to add something to this thread on perfectionism that you're talking about.
Yeah.
I have been reading and studying over the past few weeks how to do a podcast. There are all kinds of,
are we doing it right? Are we doing it right?
No, of course not. There are all kinds of rules about how you do a podcast, and they involve things like careful editing, interspersing the podcast with time pauses and jingles and all of that. And I'm just saying this because you and I have been talking about this for a while, Lizzie, about what it is to bring something into the world that is real and genuine and heartfelt, and have it be good enough. Like one of the reasons that we can do this at all is because we're not trying to be perfectionist about it, but we're trying to do something that happens and that moves. So we've gone good enough every time. And that, of course, means that sometimes we can't get the technology to work. But here we are, like again and again. So I'm just really appreciating that in advance of reading Anne Lamott's words.
Yeah. Oh. No, I think that's lovely, Justin. I love the idea that we're reading about how to do a podcast. After doing 95 podcasts.
After doing 95, that's right. How other people think we should do a podcast, which is probably not them.
Well, I love our podcast, and I appreciate it for all those reasons too, Justin. It's the thing about podcasts as well. I don't know if anybody else finds these, but I listen to quite a few of them, and I feel quite annoyed for quite a long time because there's so many things that they say that aren't the thing I went there for as well, which I think hopefully we don't do too much of, and that actually we're in a genuine conversation for the majority of the time that someone's listening between us, which I think is a good thing anyway, in my experience and my own feedback to ourselves about what it's like to listen to 17 adverts at the front or something or whatever. Yeah. So anyway, we're going to get on to the gorgeous Anne Lamott. So this this is an excerpt from a book called Bird by Bird, and she has this lovely collection of all kinds of different books, and I would really recommend having a feel into her titles and seeing what appeals, and just going for it, because she's so brilliant, and her humour is so great, and there's so many stories and anecdotes, and it's just beautifully kind of interspersed with wisdom and humour and stories, and it's very lovely. So here we go. This is from Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott. There is a whole chapter on perfectionism in Bird by Bird, because it's the great enemy of the writer and of life, our sweet, messy, beautiful, screwed up human lives. It's the voice of the oppressor. It will keep you very scared and restless your entire life if you do not awaken and fight back. And if you're an artist, it will destroy you. Do you mind, even a little, that you are still addicted to people-pleasing and are still putting everyone else's needs and laundry and career ahead of your creative spiritual life, giving all your life force away to help and impress? Well, your help is not helpful and falls short. Look, I struggle with this. I hate to be criticized. I'm just the tiniest bit more sensitive than the average bear. And yet I'm a writer, so periodically I put my work out there. And sometimes, like all writers, I get terrible reviews. So personal in nature that they leave me panting. Even with a Facebook post, do you have any idea what it's like to get 500 plus negative attacks on my character from truly bizarre strangers? Really, it's not ideal. Yet, I get to tell my truth. I get to seek meaning and realization. I get to live fully, wildly, imperfectly. That's why I'm alive. And all I actually have to offer as a writer is my version of life. Every single thing that has happened to me is mine. As I've said 100 times, if people wanted me to write more warmly about them, they should have behaved better. Is it okay with you that you blow off your writing or whatever, your creative spiritual calling, because your priority is to go to the gym or do yoga 5 days a week? Would you give us one of those days back to play or study poetry? To have an awakening? Have you asked yourself lately, how alive am I willing to be? It's all going very quickly. It's mid-May, for God's sake. Who knew? I thought it was late February. It's time to get serious about joy and fulfillment. Work on our books, songs, dances, gardens. But perfectionism is always lurking nearby, like the demonic prowling lion in the Old Testament waiting to pounce. It will convince you that your work in progress is not great and that you may never get published. Wait, forget the prowling satanic lion, your parents, living or dead, almost just as loud either way, and your Aunt Beth and your passive-aggressive friends, whom we all think you should ditch, are going to ask, "Oh, you're writing again, that's nice. Do you have an agent?"
It's so much fun.
Mm.
Okay, I'm going to read the last part of it. Yes, I get to tell my truth. I get to seek meaning and realization. I get to live fully, wildly, imperfectly. That's why I'm alive. And all I actually have to offer as a writer is my version of life. Every single thing that has happened to me is mine. As I've said 100 times, if people wanted me to write more warmly about them, they should have behaved better. Is it okay that you blow off your writing or whatever your creative spiritual calling because your priority is go to the gym or do yoga 5 days a week? Would you give us one of those days back to play or study poetry, to have an awakening? Have you asked yourself lately, how alive am I willing to be? It's all going very quickly. It's mid-May, for God's sake. Who knew? I thought it was late February. I'm going to stop there.
Yeah. It's so, for me, that, I mean, actually, when I posted this, somebody in the comments wrote, "Oh, I wish my way of procrastinating was going to the gym or doing yoga 5 days a week." I said, "Oh yeah, no, that's definitely not how I procrastinate either." So I just want to point to the fact that, you know, each of us will have our own very specific means of not attending to the thing that is calling. And please insert something else for gym or yoga 5 days a week for whatever it is that each of us is up to in that way. But it feels like one of the things that sticks out to me, particularly in that paragraph as well, is, would you give us one of those days back? Would you give yourself, but would you give us? And for me, this is such a deep invitation into, so how am I not bringing myself to the world in a way that the world would benefit? Like, what am I? It's not only about me, it's also about the world. Like, I'm depriving the world by not attending to this. And it feels like every time I step in to do something that means something in this realm, definitely the world responds.
Right.
And it's not just about me and my purpose and what I'm supposed to do, although there's alignment in there somewhere, but that it's giving something out that feels like a big theme in here. And to know just how affected I am by Anne's work, and feel if Anne's work wasn't in the world, for me to reach for each time I think, oh, this is really messed up and I'm just defunct and nothing is okay. And then I reach for her work. And if that part of the gift of all of the writers in the world and all of the people who I feel helped by and supported by wasn't there, life would be really different. And Anne's not different from me and you and anyone listening to this podcast. There's not some huge chasm between humans that means that Anne's excellence. I think Anne's quite the opposite of excellent in one way, in one of the ways that we use the word excellent, in that she's real and she brings us what's here. And that's what we're trying to do here, Justin, is to be ourselves and be real and feel into what's like actually happening, not some image of ourselves that we want to portray to save us from the shame of not being the thing that we think we should be according to the standards of perfectionism or how to do a podcast or something. And I feel that's a very powerful thing, and it means something to the world, and each of us has that opportunity.
It's wonderful hearing everything you have to say, and I'm so taken by the fierceness of Anne's writing, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And there's lots that I want to say, but I think the place that I want to pick up is just now when you were talking about excellence, because I think right in there is the trouble that we've got, which is that there was a time before our current culture, ancient Greek culture, as far as I understand it, when excellence didn't mean getting it right. It didn't mean like standing out above the rest in perfectionism and in all of that. What it meant was living a life of virtue, and virtues like creativity, generosity, courage, fierceness, love, joy, all of those things. So the definition of excellence was something really along the lines of what Anne is saying, which is what happens when we pour ourselves into something. So I know that that's what we've got committed to here, Lizzie, doing is that kind of excellence, not the worrying about whether the picture quality was exactly right and the sound was pristine and all of those kind of things, but trying to do something that's real because we can. And also because, and this is, I think, one of the central things that I'm taking from Anne's writing is, because there's something, so let's just take what we're doing now, there's something in the conversation between you and me that can only happen here. Like nobody else would get to say what we're saying in the way that we're saying it. And the reason is because you're you and I'm me, and we are in the relationship that we are in, and we're committed to what we're committed to. And even if one other person stepped in here, which who knows, we might experiment with that one day. We'll see what it's like when Turning Towards Life has another face in it somewhere down the line, maybe. Who knows if we'll do that. But it would be different then. And Anne's, this invitation that you point to, which says, would you set aside a day for us? Is so needed, because I think one part of the problem that we get into is standards and perfectionism and shame and all of that. Lizzie. But the other part we get into it is that and these all come as a sort of package, was that we take ourselves to be much too small.
Mm.
So we imagine that there's no way that there's no way that my contribution to the world, what it is that I have to say, can have any relevance, because who am I? I'm just a small thing. And what I'm meant to be doing is mostly fitting in with the machine so we've got the sort of machine narrative of what it is to be a person. And I'm meant to, be on this, in this way of being that has me leave what's most unique about myself out. And I think that we are taught and we learn, for all kinds of reasons, to be ashamed of the unique thing that we have to bring. And we know from Anne's writing, and exactly what you're saying, is that when she writes truthfully about her own experience, it is only hers, but it's also all of ours. It's so enlivening and illuminating to read and feel and hear truthful accounts of life. And there's this lovely phrase that the poet David White uses, which is that each of us is a unique frontier between ourselves and the world, like a unique sort of meeting with the world that has never happened before and will never happen again. So anyway, I can so feel the stirrings of, it's quite interesting for me. I have been thinking this weekend about how I will design my diary going into the next year. And one of the things I was already settling on was, this is a year where I spend a day a week writing. And the other thing is Lizzie, is I can feel all the objections that come up, and they're mostly the objections that Anne is pointing right into, like, who am I to do that? And I'll be letting people down, and I'll be letting myself down. And anyway, I'm meant to be whatever else it is all the time, working all the time, or earning all the time, or being responsible all the time, or all of those kind of things.
Yeah.
So I think the last thing for me that feels very present is in the part that you read that I didn't read, where Anne says, you have to fight it. This thing that stops us, you can't just roll over in front of it or somehow hope it will stop. If I wait long enough, that kind of sense will go away. No, you actually have to push back really hard in order to find the courage and the space to let ourselves express and bring ourselves fully.
Yeah. And Justin, I'm going to be a bit daring now, because I feel like one of the ways that you and I might not be doing what this is that we had a conversation a few weeks ago where we said, oh, let's design something for next year where we have something more in depth, a bigger process for people to sign up to, that would be an offering, a Thirdspace offering, is just like Turning Towards Life, but that it would be something in between being with us in person and being in Turning Towards Life with us. And we could so not do that. Like we could so not prioritize that in your work schedule, for example, or in my life. Like we could just not do that.
Yeah.
And yet I can feel and I know how meaningful that would be for us and for other people to have a deeper, more committed, more community oriented, where we join people up together and all of that kind of thing that we love to do. I can imagine us not doing that. And I feel like this is, in a way, this is the real reason that I brought this, because I read it and I thought, oh my gosh, that thing that we were talking about, I can imagine that we won't do this for that.
Yeah.
Like, it's possible. It's really possible. I can feel it. So I think, speaking it out and reconciling it in amongst this topic and allowing it to be whatever it is that we bring our best hearts and minds to in whatever way we can would be good enough. And letting ourselves do that would be really beautiful. And it might not be perfect. And it probably won't be perfect. It definitely won't be perfect. And there's so much to say, like, doing something differently in a more committed way, in a more involved way, or whatever it might be, that brings about a different thing. It might be a challenge for us. And I want to point to that here, because everyone's listening, and we don't even have an offering or a thing to describe what it would be, but I know that it's meaningful to you and I. And it's such a temptation to kind of have that as like a corner idea.
Yeah.
And to not turn towards it, even though it's called us, like it's made its voice known, that there's something that we'd love to do, and that would enable us to both properly do something together in this spirit that we've so enjoyed. And we'll be like 2 years of doing this soon, I think in November or something. I can't remember when we started, but it's not long away from 2 whole years of doing something that we really love, and we've done every single week. Like, how weird is that? I mean, like, I find that really strange, like every single week. And by the way, today I was also in a bit of a scrabble, because look, I'm completely not in my home, and with this beautiful view. We're in Tenerife. We've got this gorgeous, Justin, you'll like this lovely, this place called Los Gigantes, which is these big rocks on the island of Tenerife. And we're in amongst doing this wherever we are, whatever's going on, even if we're ill, like all of those kind of things, which is hilariously brilliant. I can't even believe it's happened and continues to happen. And clearly we like this. Like, we wouldn't be carrying on in the way that we're carrying on if this wasn't really meaningful to us. And I know it's super meaningful to both of us. And so to do something that's an extension of this, or that's more involved in this with people, and gives people more of an opportunity wherever they are in the world to join in with something more fully, would be seriously beautiful. And yet there's this weird, for me, like a paradox thing, is like the more doable it is, the more beautiful it is, the more I resist it.
Yeah, right.
It's like the stuff that feels like, oh yeah, I can just do that thing, even though it might not be like exactly what I want, I'll put some time into. But the thing that feels like, oh my goodness, how cool would that be? It kind of subtly gets squirreled to the side, so that I don't just sit down and write, as you say. And one of the things that struck me on reading Anne's passage as well was the kind of support and structure that might be necessary for these things to come to life. And I know, for example, that if we schedule things, we schedule blank space that has a label of this at the top with no agenda and no content and no nothing, we're way more likely for something to happen. Because I really trust us in the space, but creating the space, which I think Anne's pointing to with, do you just go to yoga 5 times a week and avoid the thing? If we don't create the space in the structure, and for me anyway, if I don't have support in that, by human support, I mean, where are you on the phone? We're meeting at 10 o'clock to do nothing together apart from create, make, do something together. If that's not there, my squirreling procrastination engine is too strong. So in a way, you were saying about the fierceness of fighting against this perfectionism thing. For me, the fighting comes in the form of getting support and structure. That's just something I know about myself. Like, if that's not there, my little sophisticated putting things to the side that are important becomes way more feisty and way more capable. So they're the things that I know that I need, which is human beings and structure. That is a diary entry basically, and somebody also invited to that diary entry that holds me to the thing. And so I just wanted to bring that, because I feel like we have something live that we're, and like I imagine lots of people do as they're listening to this, that we have an idea or a little kind of inkling or a calling, and can find all the reasons in the world to not do it. And so how do we find our own awareness around what keeps that pattern going, and what's some form of little antidote to it that gives us a chance of following and listening and responding to whatever the call is.
There's so much in what you're saying, Lizzie, as well as a very fierce invitation to you and I that we get going with this creative plan that we have, which I love saying it out loud to the world together. And the thing I'm feeling into as you're talking about it is, at least for me, the other angle on this that we haven't talked about yet is learning to let go. So, you know, in one sense, turning towards life has involved all of the things that you're saying. We've had structure, we've had people, we have support, but there's also, has for me, is learning to let go into the space that's created when it's there. And I think that's one of the things that Anne Lamott's pointing to when she says, do you really have to go, like, is a life where you go to yoga 5 days a week and to the gym? And you were saying, of course, there are lots of versions of procrastination. There are. And I'm not sure she's just talking about procrastination. I think that what she's talking about is this sense that we have that somehow, in order to be people, we have to sort of be on it all the time. Like, I have to know what I'm doing. I have to be a responsible person. I have to be, and even if we're not doing that, you know, even those of us who don't go to the gym 5 days a week and don't go do yoga 5 days a week, for many of us, what stops us releasing ourselves into the creative possibility of having our own voice and bringing something is the imagination that we should be. So even more so, I can't let go to write or to make something because I'm meant to be doing all of this other stuff that I'm probably not doing either, because I've got this sense that I'm meant to be. And it's this definition of being a human being that has been so prevalent in the world for such a long time, which is that so whereas the ancient Greeks had excellence in the way that we were talking about, and different cultures have different things at different times, I think that what we've had for a really long time is efficiency. Mm. So to be a human being is primarily to be an efficient person, like getting things done, completing things, you know, earning the money that I've got to earn, taking responsibility for staff. There's lots of different forms for it, and they all in themselves have value. So I'm not knocking any of them. It's the background narrative that the first thing to be as a human is efficient. And when you essentially come that way, and we're taught that, and you know, we've talked a lot about schools and education systems. Lots of us learn at school to be efficient learners and efficient, you know, exam takers. That's a sort of the goal. You get better and better at delivering this, which is completely at right angles to discovering the unknown, messy, who knows what it's going to be yet, alive thing that there is to bring, where efficiency is the furthest away possibility. And I think that a lot of us have a hard time letting go of this efficiency drive until maybe, the reason I'm saying it here is until maybe we see that it's only one story about what it is to be a human. And if we can breathe out a little bit around our efficiency narrative, we can go, okay, I don't need to be on it all the time. And that means that we can then be on other things or release ourselves into other things that wouldn't occur to us or would feel so painful. So turning towards life has been a great example because we've made structure and space into which we can release ourselves. And that's made a huge something possible. But it's, you know, in a way, it's a lot. It takes a lot, just as Anne is saying, like, you have to be really fierce about opening up that little bit of space into which you can release something alive rather than trying to claw your way to something, which is what most of us do most of the time.
Absolutely. And just, I love what you're saying, Justin. I really feel that every time we do this. And maybe this might be the first time you've listened to us, but people listening also, I think, know that this isn't I think everyone can feel that this isn't possible to script or to work out what we're going to say before we do it. And there's such beautiful opportunity in it for trusting who we are to come forth, which it does every time, just by being in this conversation with each other. And this is a very creative space. And I think also, for me anyway, it helps me to to redefine what creativity also means, which is, it's not, so I've had these kind of older notions of, oh, it means to do a painting, or even writing, I think is a massively creative thing, but when this invitation is not limited to those kind of normal ways of being creative, that there's all these different ways of ourselves coming forward, our real selves coming forward into the world, and it's so needed. And so this for us is such a wonderful opportunity, as you say, to let go into a space where things come forth that who knew we were going to say, or who knew we were going to talk about. And it feels very trusting and building of this realm of, well, the relationship between you and I, but also our own ways of being in the world that can trust what comes forth to be the thing that's allowed to come forth, and that's okay, and that we don't have to polish it, and we don't have to perfect it, and we don't have to top and tail it, or whatever the rules are you're reading about in the podcast. So there's a realness that's got permission here. Feels really, well, it feels quite subversive, actually. It feels quite like, when I think of the podcasts I have listened to and the way that they're arranged and they're very kind of formulaic and all those kind of things, I feel like, oh, we're doing something quite different to those things, and I'm happy about that. I feel good about that, and it's a generous offering, and it's just for itself, and I love that, and it feels very good to me to be doing this. And as ever in this moment, I feel the kind of the always rising gratitude and re-sanifying of myself in the speaking of whatever it is that we're speaking about in this particular space. So I'm very, very grateful to be here. And I'm just looking at the time, and I think we've been talking for about half an hour, which is our agreement. And I just want to say I so appreciate this, and feel like it gives me permission for this day to just probably, actually, if I'm really straight, continue into the kind of messiness of this little trip that we're on to Tenerife, and the imperfection of it all. It feels just that little bit more beautiful now that I am in the conversation and the consciousness about it. And I think anytime I'm away from doing all the things I should be doing in my life, like being on holiday, it feels like all of those notions of efficiency get challenged. So I'm really glad that you brought that, Justin, and that I can be aware of that in myself today. Like, what's it like to not do the efficient thing? What's it like just to not worry about what time things happen, and allow a day to go by without anything particular going on? So I'm very grateful of the timing of this, and very grateful to Anne Lamott for all of her boldness and fieriness and feistiness and bravery and subversiveness as well.
Me too.
So Justin, just quickly, do we have anything to mention about anything that we should be mentioning?
Well, I just want to keep on mentioning that in September,
oh yes,
anyone who wants to come and find out what it's like to address the big questions of being a human being that we love to address and that underpin the coaching work that we do, you can come and join us for our Foundations of Coaching program, which I'm going to be leading. And right now I forget the dates, but they are on the Thirdspace website. We are thirdspace.com. It's in London. It's a wonderful couple of days together. So I want to keep on mentioning that, and you can contact us if you've got any questions about it. And apart from that, the only other thing I can think of is that we'll be here next week, 9 a.m.
Yes, we will. And it will be Justin's source. It'll be very exciting.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us wherever you are, whenever you're listening to this. You might be listening to this in like 2047 or something, who knows? But thank you for being here, and thank you, Justin, and we will see you next week.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.